In the previous video, we used the scaffolding to generate us a model and all the views and controllers that went with it. So we were able to create, edit, delete tasks in a to-do list. In this video and the next couple of videos, we want to recreate that but from scratch without using the scaffolding. That way we can learn how each part is created and how it works together. In this video, we're just going to do a shorter one. We're not going to do anything with the model. We're just going to get up and running with a new site with like a landing page, a root page, maybe an about, and a contact us. And we'll even install a Bootstrap and get all that working. So let's get started. We're going to create a new Rails application. So we just go Rails new. I'm going to call this to do auth because eventually I'm going to add some authentication where someone would, sign up and create an account and then log in afterwards. So creating this new Rails application. Okay, and then after it was able to download all the gems and all the JavaScript libraries and pack them all together, we should be done. And now we can cd into our application. Once in our application directory, we can start the Rails server and visit our page. And it's all working. Now, the first thing we'll do is we'll create a home page for us to land on. And so we're going to use a generator. In order to create a page, we need to create two things. First, we need a route. So that's a URL that will come into our server, and then it will route it to a controller, which we also need to create. So I'm going to use the generator here to create a controller. Now in the last video, we used the generator to use scaffold. In this, we're just creating a controller. There's no model, no database that we're dealing with. And we need to give it a name. I'm going to call this the home controller because it's kind of in charge of the home page or the landing page of our site. And I'll just create one action inside of that, the index action. If we want to, we can also create an about and a contact page. But for now, we'll just have that one action. So when that ran, it created a route for us. And it also created the controller for us right here. And we also got an index view right here. So let's open those up in a text editor and see what they look like. So now in our application folder, in our to-do folder, we have this config directory where our configuration goes. And one of those files is the routes file. And we can see that it added in this new route. Basically a get request will go to the home controller index action. So we're going to modify this though. We want our home page or the root path to go to this. So we'll just go map root to, and then the home controller, the index action like that. Okay. So that's the route this created. So now the home page, instead of saying, yay, you're on Rails, will now go to the home controller. So let's see if that worked. So we see we're here again. We'll try our home page. And here we go. We're in the home view and the index action. And the generator even kind of told us where we could find this. So let's go back to our code. And now in our application folder right here, we have our controllers. Here's our home controller. And all it does is have a method that does nothing, just an index method. But it has to be there because the routes is going to try to call this method. Because we said whenever they go to the root path, go to the home controller and call the index action. So if there's no index action, then we'll probably get an error. Now, by default, this method is named index. So if we go into our views on the home right here, we have this index file right here. And hopefully you know that this is where our HTML goes. From the previous video, we did some modification of these files right here. So there's all of our code. So we can change this if we want. And say just welcome to do a task manager. Okay. And now that we've changed that, let's see if we see those changes. And reloading the page, sure enough, the changes happened. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get Bootstrap installed. Now I'm going to leave this mostly as an exercise for the viewer to search on the web and figure out how to install Bootstrap. Now be careful, we're running Rails 6. Rails 6 modified what's called the asset pipeline, and that's what includes our JavaScript and our CSS. So that JavaScripts are now installed through Webpacker. So we're actually going to use Webpacker to install this, so make sure you pay attention in class or search for Rails 6 install Bootstrap, because on Rails, even Rails 5.1, if you install it the old way using a gem, it might not work. Now just to quickly tell you what Bootstrap is basically a bunch of pre-written CSS with some JavaScript included that will make our site look really nice with not a lot of effort on our part. Now, if this were a design class, it would kind of be doing all that design work, but since this class we're trying to get more to the Rails part, we don't want to spend a lot of time styling our page and making it look nicer, and Bootstrap will take a lot of time out of that. Of course, it is one other thing that you'll have to learn. Now, the first thing that you'll, after you get Bootstrap kind of installed, next you have to set up your basic template so that it has a Bootstrap navigation bar and other stuff like that. So to figure out how to do that, click on Examples right here, and we can use the starter template. Would probably be a good one. If you want to add a little extra code to get you started, you can do that, but just click on the starter template and view the page source. So now that you're viewing the page source, you want to copy most of that. Probably you can ignore this part right here. You don't want to re-include the Bootstrap stuff because hopefully you installed that with when you installed Bootstrap into Rails. You don't need to include that. But some of these things like the charset tag and the viewport tag you probably want to include, but at the same time you want to be careful because all of this stuff in the application layout file, which there isn't a lot, you want to keep that in there. So you kind of need to merge these two files together, preserving the stuff that's in your application layout file on your Rails code and adding in the additional stuff here. But none of the style sheet links and none of the JavaScript links down there, all of that should be included by installing your Bootstrap into your application. So if you have questions about that, make sure you come to class and I'll discuss more about it. So off camera I've gotten Bootstrap installed, and we can see we have a Bootstrap navigation bar, and I've also included our content so we can see that we have this here. Now the layout file, just as a reminder from the previous video, you'll find that in the app views layout application.html. Remember, you don't want to delete the yield call because that's where the stuff gets stuffed in, and you also don't want to delete any of the custom Ruby code in there. You just want to add stuff to it. Now I've also added some more CSS in my app assets style sheets home.scss file. This is the stuff I added was the starter template. It had some custom CSS for that, basically some padding on the top, so you want to include that in here. And I also added something to style up my footer that has my copyright on it. So to get that working, I will show you this application.scss file. And if you notice the S, if you look in your project, it probably just says .css, and it also has a lot of comments up here. I renamed my file to SCSS, which means that this is now going to be a Sass file instead of just a CSS. Now you might want to search on the web, find out exactly what Sass is or SCSS. But basically it puts steroids on your CSS, so it allows you to do a lot, including import other files. Now because this is a Sass file, we can't use the normal Rails ASLEP pipeline to make everything happen. So we need to by hand import each one of our other style sheets. So this imports my Bootstrap CSS, and down here we have our home CSS. We make sure we have to include that by hand. So we're back here in my application layout file where I have my navigation bar, this is basically, hopefully you have created your template before you continue on here, but I basically took the nav bar from the starter template and took the stuff out that I didn't want to, and I really just have two links here. Now we also have right here what's called the navbar brand, and they make it a link to the root path, or at least that's what I want to do. So I can modify this, and it's certainly okay to use an anchor link tag in my code here, but we can also use the Rails helper link to right here, and I will just name my site to do, and that goes to the root path. So the root path is a little method that will return the root path, and then we can add some CSS on here, which is a class that was navbar brand. Like that. And you can see that's this link right here, and I can test it out. I can click on it, and sure enough it goes to my root path. Of course that's the only page I have right now. So let's get working on these navigation links. If you notice, this one is highlighted and this one's not. This is kind of giving us an indication that this is the page you're on. Now here's again is the code of my navigation bar, and how that highlight happens is this active class right here, and the active class missing on this about link that I have right here. So what we would need to do, what we want to do, is write some code that says if the page I'm currently displaying, because this is an application layout file for all of our pages, but if the page I'm currently on is this link, make it active. If not, don't make it active. If it's this link, make this one active. If not, don't make this active. So we would have a little bit of code here, and we might have 5 or 6 different navigation links. So this is actually a good case to write a helper method. Now we won't write a lot of helper methods. In fact, we might write this one and one more in the entire class. But a helper method is a method that we'll create that will write us a whole bunch of HTML code that can include if statements and everything else. Now in the app helpers folder is this home helper right here. So, and we're going to call it navlink, and it will take 2 parameters, the text that we want to show up on the link and the path that the link should go to. And we're going to say if our current page is equal to the path that that the link is drawing up, we'll make it active, else we won't make it active. Now if you notice, there's not much HTML in here, but all of these are also helper methods right here that generate HTML. So the content tag method generates an li tag, and inside we have a do and, so this is a block of code, and this is what will be inside of the li tag. We're using the same link to helper method we used before to create our link with the right class on it, and inside of there we're going to have our text, and we're going to add on that screen reader, the current, and this is to make our site accessible for screen readers. And again, if our content, if it's not the current page, we're not going to include the active, and we're not going to include this current the span tag with the current in there right there. So this is a navlink helper method. So once we have that written, we can replace all of our links and make sure we leave our UL tag in there, but all the LI tags, because our helper method includes all of that. So now I can just say nav link, give it the text that I want to show up, and the path that I want it to go to. So, and the root path is another helper method that just generates this slash path. And we'll also include another nav link. We'll call this one about. And for now, that will just go to slash about. And you can see this is quite a bit shorter, and now it's really easy to add a nav link onto our navigation bar using the nav link helper. So let's see if that works, and just refresh, and it should all still be working. Of course, when we go to this about, we don't have an about page, so when you go to a URL that the Rails cannot figure out how to route, this is the error that you're going to get. So now let's create our about page. So we're going to go to here, and we're going to create a named route. So you can, again, this URL will tell you more about how you can route to different pages, but this is a named route. So we're going to have the about/about path go to the home controller and call the about method. Of course, that method doesn't exist, so let's go up to our controllers, add a new method in here, and this about method doesn't need to do anything. But we do need to add some HTML, so now in our app views home folder, because this is a home controller, so its views are going to be found in the home controller, is going to look for an about view. So if we don't have the view, let's just see what happens. Okay, we refresh and we're saying, hey, we're missing a template. So it can't find the view to send to us. So all we have to do is add a new file here, and we'll call it about.html.erb. And now we can add another h1 tag and say, I am the about page. And refreshing, and we get it working again with the about page. Now, we can't really see it with my browser here, but if we open up a new tab, we see that our title is called To Do Auth on both pages. What if we wanted that to be different? And then sometimes I want the title to show up down here, and sometimes I might not want the title to show up down there. So we're going to create our last helper method, which will be a title method that will set our title up here, and then also display our method on our layout file if we want it to, or not display it if we don't want to. So back in my helpers folder, that's app helpers home helper, I added this method in off camera. It takes two parameters, the title that we want to show up, and a boolean on whether we want the title to show or not. Now this defaults to true, so if we only include one parameter, then it will default to show the title. This will just save an instance variable away for later on the view. If this is true, we'll know it and we'll show the title on our view as well. If not, we'll just put it up in the title tag. And then we just use this content for right here. We label it as this is our title and just the name that should show up. Now you can see up here in my title, this is on my application layout file again in my title. Every page will have to-do list in the title, and then we'll put a bar with a couple of spaces around it, and then we'll yield out our title. So that content for tag in the helper, whenever I call yield with the title symbol in there, then it will yield out whatever I put in the title. Now I have this right here, which is a little bit of Ruby. This is called a canceling if statement. So This is if not, you can read unless as if not. So if there's nothing in the title, then don't do any of this at all. So we won't even put the bar there. So if we have no title, we'll just get to-do list. If there is a title, we'll get to-do list, a bar, and whatever the title is. Now, later on, and down below in my HTML, wherever I want the title to show up, and this will depend on you and how you design your page, I say if the show title is true. Remember that was set in the helper method. I'll just put a div tag in here with the title displaying on our page in an h1 tag. So now let's look back on my page. You see that my title doesn't show up because this is the home page, and I never call that title helper, so the only title I have is to-do list. Now, instead of including an h1 tag here, I can just call my title method that I created and pass in the title that I want to show up, which is welcome. Okay, refreshing, we see that it says welcome when we're on the home page. Now let's go to the about page. The about page, we never set the title. All we got is to-do list up here. Also, if you notice, our navlink helper is now highlighting the about path instead of the home path, so that's great. And so we can put a title call up here as well. To say about us. Now we'll save this and refresh. And now look at the title. It says about us, and then we have the title down here on the page. Now if I go here and I say false, meaning I don't want the title to show up on the page, refreshing, we still have the about us title up here, but it doesn't show up on our page. So that's the title helper working in conjunction with our application layout file allows all of that to happen. Now on the about page, we can include a paragraph about us. And we should see that show up on our other on our page. Clicking on the about link, sure enough, we see that. So that's all we'll do in this video. And the next video, we'll work on creating a model for our tasks so that we can have a way to create tasks